Well, good day, everybody. I am Laurie Battaglia. I'm the CEO of Aligned at Work in Scottsdale, Arizona. Aligned at Work helps companies, organizations to create the kind of work culture where people actually want to come to work. And I am really happy about today's conversation because it's with my friend Sharon Preszler. Sharon and I met in a group of professional women speakers. And we both went to the same school to learn how to perform on stage. And I'm going to take a wild guess here, Sharon, and say that probably like me, performing may or may not be a natural gift for you. I think you and I have the no bullshit, let's just be straight up who we are. So you can expect another candid conversation today. And I asked Sharon to be on our Wake Up Call Live when I saw a post on Facebook, we're Facebook friends, where she talked about what we've decided to call the myth of meritocracy. That we hear a lot about it these days, and we're seeing all kinds of DEI just making it a negative thing when it really isn't. And so Sharon and I are both the only woman in the room, although I don't fly any jet planes or anything like that. So I've talked long enough. Sharon, would you please introduce yourself to the folks that are on our live and those who are going to join us later in recording and talk a little bit about your background?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm excited for this conversation as well. DEI and especially the inclusion piece is very important to me because I was the first woman to fly F-16s in our Air Force, which meant I was the only woman almost everywhere I went.
Yeah.
And it was a very, Top Gun is a little over the top, but it's that kind of culture. It's very testosterone heavy, if you will.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of adjusting on all of our parts to do, and it caused some serious challenges for me. And I know it's gotten better, but there's still work to be done. And with what's been going on with a bunch of executive orders and DoD policies and things, DEI really came back into the forefront. And as you said, as a negative thing, and we can change the words if you want, but we still need diversity, equity, and inclusion.
We sure do. We sure do. And I think maybe for you and for I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I always used to think of things as equality versus equity. And there's a little bit of a shift and a difference there. How about you? Was it more about equality back in the day, or was equity a thing?
No, it was definitely more equality. And it's really for me, it was always focused on equal opportunity.
Yeah.
So the law used to prohibit women from flying fighters. It used to prohibit women from combat at all. And when they changed the law, it took the Air Force a while, but they changed the policy then to allow women into fighters. And that's how I made the transition. I was always qualified to do that based on how I did at pilot training, but I wasn't allowed to. And that's where the equality comes in, is that we should allow people to get the opportunities they've earned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And not hold them back because of outdated ideas about gender or color or anything.
Yes, absolutely. And I think when we talk about equity, and this is something that came up for me in the past, probably 5 years, when equity started to be the word that I saw more often than equality. So it was always back in my day, and I'm an ex-banker, not a pilot. You were just hoping that you could get equal access, but that's really what equity is about, is having equal access. So talk a little bit about how you were basically, I believe, at the top of your class, and despite being the best, so meritocracy says, I don't have the textbook definition here, but meritocracy says, hey, we want the best person to be in that position, the most qualified, the one with the most experience, or the most, the good grades that say, I could fly that jet and I probably won't crash it, it's okay. So,
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I graduated from pilot training number 3 in my class of 20. So not number 1, but still eligible for fighters. And the way we did assignments then, we picked our assignment based on what the Air Force gave us to pick from, right? So they always have the final say. So they give us choices, and then based on our rank order, we could choose. And at the time, I actually joked with the colonel that was running our, it was a big video teleconference call back then, right? We didn't have Zoom. And then I would like that F-16 to be determined, which meant they didn't know when you were going to start training, but you would get an F-16 eventually.
Okay.
And he looked at me like the smart aleck that I am and said, well, what would you really like, Captain Preszler? And I went, oh, I'll take that C-21 to Andrews, sir. And off I went, right? And that was the end of it as far as I thought at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I was at Andrews for less than 6 months when I got a phone call saying, hey, we're changing the rules. Would you like to go fly that F-16 you mentioned?
Okay.
So yeah, it was a big deal, but it was an opportunity that was earned. And the way they chose the initial cadre of women fighter pilots was based on flight performance, right? So you had to have graduated with a fighter eligible, essentially, for an assignment. And you had to not be in a major weapons system, which means the Air Force was going to have to retrain you at some point anyway. So they weren't wasting money. And then they called your current commander and they asked your current commander what they thought about you and if you would do well in this with this opportunity.
Okay.
And they had done all that before I got my phone call. So yeah, there was 7 of us initially.
Okay. And what year did that change?
1993.
Okay. So in my lifetime, I would say, oh, not that long ago, but
yes,
it's a while. It's a while. But I don't know about you. I kind of came into my business career in the late 70s. I graduated high school in the mid 70s, and then was really out in the working world at about age 21, in the late 70s. And that's when things started to change legally. Yes. But just because it said something legally didn't mean it was so.
Right. And when, so it was in 1977 when women were first allowed to go to pilot training in the Air Force. So yeah, it's, and then let me do math in public, 16 years later, we're allowing women in fighters. Yeah. Right. So there's the change, and I call it progress. And some people don't appreciate that progress. Right. Yeah. And that's part of, I think, the problem with the PR of DEI, if you will, is people assume that it replaces the meritocracy. Yeah. When really what we're talking about is opportunities. Yes. Right. The NFL had the Rooney rule, which meant that because there were not enough black coaches in the NFL based on experience and other things, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't put in a quota and say you have to hire this many black people. They said you have to interview at least one candidate for your head coaching job that is a person of color. You didn't have to hire him, but you had to interview him. Mm-hmm. Right. And then guess what? When they went looking specifically for those people, they found a lot of talent. Yeah. And they hired a lot of non-white head coaches in the NFL. Yep. That's a DEI success story to me. Right. It is. And being an NFL coach, there's so many intangibles, right, on who they're going to hire. And so there's no way to say who is the best qualified. Right. Right. And that's what happens a lot of times when you look at DEI or when you look at hiring. You can't tell who's going to be the best qualified. There's often, 5 really solid candidates. And now who are you going to pick? Right. Yes. And that's where bias comes into play. Yes. And that's where having access is so important. Right. Yeah. Because in every hiring job, personality also plays a role. You have to be able to work with the team. You have to be able to interact with clients. You have to be able to work with a flight crew on a commercial airliner like I did at Southwest Airlines. Yeah. Right. So there's things that you can't just put on a piece of paper, right? And crunch through the numbers and say, this is the number one candidate. That's why we have interviews. That's why we talk to people. Right. But if you don't even talk to them, if you don't look for them, then you won't find them. You'll find exactly what you want. Right. Exactly. I was talking to a friend recently, and he was saying that one of the things that had actually benefited some friends of his was, oftentimes there's a set aside. It's not a quota per se, but there's a set aside that says, okay, 20% of the vendors that you choose need to be women, disadvantaged, whatever the certifications are. And so that is, and if you think about that, let's pretend for a moment that all the concerns about DEI are real and legitimate and all that. Really, you can't give 20% of the business to people who might not even know they qualified for it, even though they are qualified for it. Because I am here to tell you, you do not just automatically waltz in the door, give a half-assed proposal, and get it accepted. It just doesn't happen that way. You jump through hoop after hoop after hoop after hoop.
But my friend was telling me that some of his male friends were benefiting because once that set aside goes away, then here we are, then they get in. And I was like, and here we are again back in 1978, 77, 80, when I was first breaking into banking. And I remember our HR director, I was maybe 3 to 5 years in at that point. And I knew that we had a highly qualified woman about a half-hour drive away in one of our branches, but it was our furthest branch. And I said, well, what about Barb? And he said, now you see, I wouldn't think a woman. And I said, stop right there. You wouldn't think a woman what? Would you think a man? And so, he did not get off easy with me. Yeah. And he said, well, she has children. I said, her children are teenagers headed for college. Not that that matters.
Most of the many employees have children as well.
Yes, exactly. He did, but, had a wife to take care of those for him so that he didn't have to worry about it.
Right.
So tell me about some of the struggles you had as you were advancing and some of the, see, I wouldn't think a woman conversation that you might have had that you might feel okay sharing.
Sure. So some of the worst ones, I will tell you, honestly, I was told by a fellow fighter pilot, not in my squadron at least, that I was going to cost people's lives by being a fighter pilot, that I was going to ruin fighter squadrons. I had people refuse to shake my hand. They didn't want to know me, didn't want to admit that I existed. Mm-hmm. But I have to say, I had a handful of very, very supportive fighter pilots in my squadron, which made things a lot better, right? And the key for me was, being a fighter pilot, it's a performance-based industry, is what I like to say, right? Yeah. General Brown did that commercial a couple of years ago. I put my helmet on, I put my mask up, I put my visor down, and you don't know who I am. Mm-hmm. You don't know if I'm male or female, African American or white, Asian American. Nobody knows. You just know I'm an F-16 pilot, right? So once I built my credibility as a pilot, and people knew I could perform, then there was more welcoming and less resistance. Mm-hmm. There were still pockets of resistance, right? But they weren't the majority anymore. And that was a very welcome change. But I also had so many times when, in the military, we have uniforms, and our uniforms in my flight suit, I have patches, and the patches say what I do. So I have my name, my flight wings with a little F-16 silhouette next to them. I have squadron patches, all these things that show you that I am an F-16 pilot in the 22nd Fighter Squadron. Mm-hmm. And I would still have fellow pilots walk up to me when I'm in uniform and say, so, what do you do in the 22nd? And I would look down at my wings, and I'd look right back at them, and I'd say, I fly F-16s? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think, because it didn't even occur to them.
Yes.
Now, the thing that I learned, those instances were not as painful because it was really almost understandable. There weren't very many of us. So the first inclination is going to be that I must do something else. I'm a flight surgeon, or I'm a flight nurse or something, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't take those as personally as, the people who told me I was going to end up killing my fellow fighter pilots because of my ineptitude. That was a little more painful. But yeah, I mean, those kind of stories, and they happen in commercial aviation as well. Yeah,
absolutely.
Southwest Airlines is about 4% of their pilots are women.
Okay, is that all?
Yes.
4%.
And there's been a lot of talk about DEI in aviation lately, right? And how women are getting hired that aren't qualified. And that is such a false narrative that I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
Everybody has check rides by the FAA. Everybody has training by the company. Everybody has check rides from the company that they fly for. And no company wants to put anybody out there who's not qualified, right? Because people get hurt. Mm-hmm. And whether, even if you don't care about the people who get hurt, it really hurts your bottom line when people get hurt, right?
Yes.
So they're not doing that. That's not happening. Yeah. Right? But I still had conversations with a first officer when I was a captain who was explaining to me why his friend didn't get hired because we're hiring too many women and minorities, were his words.
Yes.
90% of the pilots hired by Southwest Airlines right now, 90% are white male.
Yeah.
Probably more than that, but I will tell you at least 90%.
Wow.
So the 10% of qualified women and people of color that are getting hired are somehow keeping your buddy from his job? No, your buddy tanked the interview. he has a DUI or some failed check rides you don't know about. Something else happened. It wasn't the fault of the people that aren't like you. And that's what we do, right? We like to blame our lack of success on people who aren't like us.
Yep.
We like to make them the bad guy, right? It's not a meritocracy, because if it was a meritocracy, I obviously would have got what I deserved.
Well, yes.
Right?
We would have gotten there sooner. We would have had more flight time in your case. We would have not had to jump all those hoops that men who got the jobs didn't have to jump through. And oftentimes, I don't know how you feel about it, but I worked with some really underqualified men in my time. There's a joke about mediocre men. That a lot. And it seemed like any of the women who actually did jump all the hurdles had to be so much more qualified. And now I'm seeing that women are getting so many more of the degrees out there, so many more of the certifications, so many more of the PhDs in life. And I think we do it might be for a love of learning, because, you can't do it if you don't love learning. But it's also because we keep thinking if we get that one more thing, that everything will go away. Okay, now I'm going to give us a timeout right now because we're having some technical issues with LinkedIn. And I know Fawn's in the background. I'm seeing a pop-up that says we can go live there. And I guess the question is, so we're going to do a little triage here in the moment. I think we want to keep on going, put a note in LinkedIn, and then post it up later and be available for questions and things like that. So we're live right now on Instagram and YouTube. And so we'll grab it from there and from here, and then we'll post it out to LinkedIn.
Okay.
I think. Okay. Now, so Sharon, we probably won't have a lot of questions and things because our following is on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So we will just answer questions later on, and hopefully people will tag us and we'll put up a note to that effect. Okay. Now we were talking about meritocracy, getting ahead, and sometimes far less qualified people having the jobs because the system favors white male applicants more than female.
Well, in aviation in particular, it's not just the applicants, it's the whole process, right?
Talk about that a little bit.
In the civilian side of aviation, you start off, you get your private pilot's license, and then you continue getting ratings and qualifications, right? And then you build your hours, and then you finally get to apply to an airline. There's minimum hours that you have to have before you can even apply, right? But in that process, I hear from a lot of women on a few different, I'll call them women in aviation support groups, if you will, on Facebook. And they're struggling because their instructor doesn't treat them the way he does other people. She's being belittled by other students at the school, or all these things, right? Because even as you go through this training, when you're learning something new and challenging, she's probably the only woman there. And because there's fewer women pilots, there's fewer women flight instructors, right? So you don't fly with other women very often. And it depends. Most flight instructors, civilian flight instructors, are young. Most of them are in their 20s, right? So they're not necessarily the most mature people. They don't necessarily have the best instructional techniques developed because this is kind of a way to get paid and build hours so you can go to an airline. Yeah. Right? So they're not in it for the love of teaching. They're in it because they want to get to the job they started trying for, 3 or 4 years ago. Got it. Yep. So they have to fight through all of that as well and be persistent and strong to even complete the process to make yourself qualified to apply. Wow. And go ahead. I found in my instance, when you're the only whatever you are, right? I don't know whatever, in my case, obviously the only woman in the room or the only woman pilot on the entire base. Everybody knew what I was doing, right? If I did something great, everybody knew that was good. But if I messed something up, everybody knew. Everybody knew. Right? There's no anonymity to be found anywhere. You can't hide. Yeah. So you really have to perform well or you lose your credibility quicker, I think, than the men. Yeah, I had that experience as well. I was at one point a bank security officer. So when I would go down to Philadelphia from Pottstown, Pennsylvania, I would drive into the city and go up to the Core States, big place where we used to meet. It was me and
although this hair is white now, it used to be dark. So me, the dark-haired woman, and there was a blonde woman from one of the big savings and loans. And this was mostly savings and loans, I believe, back in the day. And everybody knew her. Let's just say she had the pretty factor, and she was smart, and I have the smart factor. So there's that. And I realized pretty quickly that they were all going to know me, so I could choose how I wanted them to know me and make conscious choices about that. And as a result, sometimes I would get, asked to come work over here at this organization because people knew me as somebody that could get things done. But I think I hear that a lot from people of color too, that not only are you doing your thing for you, but you are representing, like in our case, all other women, or they might be representing all people of color, because whatever we do or do well or fail to do will be held against us, and and like see all those women are like that, or see all those people of color are like that. So you're representing big time.
I actually talk about that very situation in one of my keynotes, because I don't know a woman pilot anywhere who prefers being singled out. Right. We all just want to do our jobs and enjoy our lives. Right? Yeah. We don't want to be special cases. Right.
Right.
But that's impossible. You can want it all you want, but it's not ever going to happen. Right.
Right.
So I try to remind people that, yes, you are representing, whether you want to or not. Right. You might be the only woman pilot that this person interacts with in their lives. Right.
Yep.
So for all of the gentlemen who ask me if I know what I'm doing, or, how many hours I have, or why I have the job I have, I also have little kids, especially young girls, who see me in uniform as a pilot and come up to the cockpit and are super excited.
I bet.
And that is what I focus on, right? You can't focus on what haters are going to hate, right? You can't just focus, you can't focus on them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excuse me. Mm-hmm. So we just need to keep going and just accept the fact that you're going to be noticed.
Yeah. Yeah. I do a lot of what I do for my granddaughters. I have a son, and then he has two daughters that are now 22 and 19. Okay. And I do what I do because I don't want them to have to suffer the same kinds of indignities in the workplace or any place else that you and I did.
Right.
And I'll tell you what gives me hope is the oldest granddaughter spent a semester in Italy because she's an artist. So she spent a semester over in Rome. And I asked her, well, I forget, it was kind of, I asked her a question, and she said, it's the guys that are creepy because she was living with two other women from, her age from school. And she said, the guys that are creepy are the ones that are over 40, 50 years old, grabbing us on the public transit and those kinds of things. She said, the guys our age and a little bit older, they respect us more. And I was like, okay, maybe we're doing something right here. And I would have liked to have thought that by now we would never be having this conversation. On the other hand, the people that are instigating that conversation are, shall we say, pushing 80 years old. And I'm big on lead follower, get the hell out of the way. And I don't think this is the type of leadership that I want to see in my lifetime. I want all people to be equal. I want them to have equal access to things. And then, great, let the meritocracy kick in.
Right.
Like, let it do its thing.
Yeah.
I also have thoughts on that.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, there are some people in their 40s and 50s who are still having those those concerns, right?
Yeah. If you need to call for anything, just go ahead and do it. And I'll just ramble.
I'm all right. We'll see. But the myth of the meritocracy, or the problem with the meritocracy, is it allows those who have risen to a higher position in society, right? Yeah. To look down on those who haven't, because if you think everything is based on your hard work and performance, right? Then if I could do it, anybody could do it.
Yeah.
Right. And then that allows you to look at the people who haven't moved from their position that they were born in. Right. Yeah. And you look at them with disdain and you go, well, put a little more work in. Right.
Right.
Anybody can do this. It's a meritocracy. Well, not really. I mean,
not really.
Socioeconomics play a part. Families plays a part. Support systems play a part. If if I go to the local high school in South Phoenix, I'm going to have a very different education than if I go to the high school in Scottsdale.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The way our school systems are run and funded is by property tax. So the nicer neighborhoods get more money.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
So you get better educational opportunities for your kids if you live in a neighborhood with more expensive homes.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
So there's one systemic problem that stops the meritocracy at a very young age, or at least hinders it, right? Now, yes, people can climb above that, and they do, but it's not an equal playing field.
Right. It's
right?
just not. Yeah. And I think the other thing, and it's kind of come up subtly, is that you and I were the only people in the room. And so here's one of those. Back in my day, you knew you were likely going to be the only woman in the room or the only woman on the base or whatever it was. And that's just the way it was. I had brothers, so I thought I knew I was as smart as them. I was as good as them. Why wouldn't I have equal access? I did not, by the way, but why wouldn't I? And I just find that sometimes, people want to see people doing what it is they want to see people that look like them doing the thing that they want to do. So little girls seeing you fly the plane for Southwest are going to say like, oh, she did it, I can do it too. Whereas I think, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we expected that we would be the only one in the room and there wouldn't be anybody that looked like us. But we're finding out that really people do need to see people that look like them in the roles.
Yes. And that is, I've been kind of outspoken about I call it the DEI purge on military websites, right? Under the guise of unit cohesion. Right. So somehow taking down, it got put back up, by the way, but it did get taken down. Jackie Robinson's page. Right?
Yeah.
Because he was in the Army and he was an officer in the Army. And he also wrote the color barrier in baseball. Right. And we don't want people to see that. That somehow is impacting present day unit cohesion.
Yeah.
Stories about the WASPs, the women air service pilots that inspired me. Right. They're somehow impacting unit cohesion today.
Right.
Stories about General Levitt or stories about Fifi Malakowski, who was the first Thunderbird woman pilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not impacting unit cohesion. It's all a smokescreen.
It is.
It's about who gets remembered, right? Mm-hmm. And it's about who we want to show as representatives of our military. And it is not women and people of color right now.
Yes.
So that feels like a personal attack to a lot of people, right? That the contributions I made to the service over 20 years, we don't value those anymore.
Right.
Or for my friends on active duty who can't talk about it because there's rules, right?
Right.
They also feel attacked.
Yeah.
Right? They don't feel like, by tearing down all these things that we've been working towards, they feel like they're not valued. And I don't know how to fix that except what I'm doing, which is, it's one of the reasons I kind of kicked into being on LinkedIn more and speaking more and doing things more, is because I'm fired up about all this. It is wrong on so many levels.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And it started for me after the crash between the Army helicopter and the airliner outside of DC, right?
Yes.
Which was tragic. That DC airspace is congested, to say the least.
Apparently a hot mess. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But DEI didn't have anything to do with it. Right. And that's the first thing we're going to go to, because we're anti-DEI now. Oh, well, that woman pilot was unqualified and that's why all those people died. See, we shouldn't have DEI. And I was like, it's not how it works, people. It's just not.
Nope. And it's a damn shame on so many levels. And I watched the whole thing. You were actually the first one I saw. I didn't know that the purge was going on. And I think for those who don't know, I think what happened, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the little bots went out and crawled all over all the websites and started taking off anything that had to do with women, anything that had to do with anything other than white men went. Because I know that my Navajo friends, the code talkers, went, and and people were losing their minds, as they should. And so I think I saw your 404 thing and went, what's happening? And figured it out that way. And now what they're doing is looking at it and bringing some of it back. But now we're after the Smithsonian and we're after all the things. And I just find it unconscionable. And I don't understand the thought process behind it, because too many people seem to think that there were quotas in place and still in place, and there are not and have not been, and that underqualified people are getting in. And it's just, it's insanity. Sorry, I'm on a rant. It's insanity. It is erasing history, which basically was pretty damn whitewashed when I went through high school anyway. I had to learn what I learned afterwards and from other sources. And thank you for the internet.
Yes.
So,
and while I don't agree with the policy at all, the anti-DEI policy that's been issued in executive order and carried out by the SecDef, right? I don't agree with it. But if you're going to do that, if you really think that highlighting accomplishments of women and people of color is impacting unit cohesion, then don't do that going forward.
Right.
You control public affairs. These are all stories that were written at taxpayer expense that are being pulled down. These are written by public affairs officers all over the country, right? To help make the Air Force look good, or the military look good, right? And now we're pulling them all at more government expense, right?
Yep.
If you want to change the policy going forward. That's your prerogative. You're the Secretary of Defense, right? But there is absolutely no need, and I think it is so wrong to go backwards and remove the historical accomplishments, because like we said earlier, sometimes you need to see somebody doing that to know that it's even possible. Right. I mean, the first time we put a woman on the Thunderbirds, that was huge, right? Because their whole idea is publicity, right? That's their purpose, right? And so little girls all over the nation are seeing, Combo Weeks, Fifi Malakowski, Mace Coran, they're seeing them fly these jets and precision, right?
Yes.
And look just as cool and just as amazing as the guys do.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah.
Just like these stories are important. They inspire people.
They really are. They really are. I had the privilege of meeting Mace Curran because she was in, so the school where you and I went, she was in my core initial 2-day introduction. And I was like, you did what?
No, she's amazing.
Yeah.
She's great. And but even some of her stories and things like the thing that really bothers me about it. Well, so much bothers me about it. One good example is I have a friend who is a Wizzo in the Strike Eagle F-15E. So she sits in the back seat and basically drops bombs and guides them and things.
Mm-hmm.
She got over 1,000 combat hours. So 1,000 hours in a jet like that is a big deal, right? I have 1,300 in the F-16. Yeah. And 50 something of them are combat. She had 1,000 combat hours.
Wow.
And of course it got an article written about it, right? Because it's a big accomplishment.
Yes.
And of course the article did mention the fact that she's a woman, because we're only like 3% of fighter pilots. So we're nowhere close to not being, the only or with the few, right?
Right.
So that story has been removed from DoD websites. But if you go look, there's at least 2 that I found, stories of white men who have 1,000 combat hours.
Huh. Amazing.
Right? Same exact story. 2 are still out there and 1 isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where are these contributions valued? First of all, that's a lot of time in the air in combat, 1,000 hours.
Yeah.
And if they are valued, why do you have to go back and remove them? Right?
Exactly.
So I'm obviously bothered by that. I'm sorry, but that's not about meritocracy, but in a way it is, right?
It is. It's all kind of tied together. One leads to the other, for sure.
Exactly.
Yes.
And, I've heard, I think the most offensive thing you could say to me when I was flying was that I was a DEI hire, right? Because in those simple words, you've taken everything that I've worked for, everything that I've accomplished, and you've minimized it. It doesn't count. It doesn't count that I was very good at what I did. Because I'm a woman, it just doesn't count. There must be some other reason I'm there.
Right.
And that's wrong. I had a friend of mine say something about Vice President Harris. Well, she's just a DEI hire anyway. And I'm like, every vice president is a DEI hire. The whole reason you hire them is to bring in some part of the country that you don't think is going to vote for you without them, right? That's what they
There's
are.
that.
So I just don't understand it.
Yes. Yeah, that's crazy. Fawn tells me that there is a comment on YouTube, but I can't see it on our things. So Fawn, if there's a way you can type that in the private chat, we'll respond to that when it comes up. So if anybody live sees me looking down, looking over, looking away, I'm minding multiple ways. Oh, there it is. Okay. Scrubbing us about aligned back to everyone falls under the white male effect. No one's special under this BS because you're not white and male. Okay. Yeah.
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 And I will tell you that, especially the younger generation of pilots, like you said earlier, it's the, mandatory retirement age for the FAA pilots is 65. Right? So the guys even my age, I'm 60 now, right? There's still a bunch of them who are a little questionable sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. But the younger generation, I mean, they've flown with us and trained with us and they know us. Right.
Yep.
So they don't question our capabilities.
No. And that's what I find too, with the whole thing where we're talking DEI in general is if people think that the two youngest generations that are in the workforce right now are going to go for that stuff, forget it. Because they're the ones saying we need more of this. This should just be the way it is. And we've raised them well, I think. And I don't know, I have hope for the future because I think we've raised the younger generations well to welcome other people in. And I'm hoping this is a glitch in the matrix and not a permanent way of being, because I'm not here for it if it is. It's like,
interesting because the DEI focus to me is very similar to the transgender in the military focus, right? I looked the other day because I was writing an article about it, and there's like 5 executive orders, a letter to the Justice Department, a DoD policy or 2 that all have to do with transgender people. And transgender people are like less than 1% of our population. So we're spending a lot of energy and effort. There's fighting in the Ukraine, there's fighting in Gaza, there's economic struggles all over the world. And we are severely focused on those 1% of people in the US that apparently, people think aren't fit to serve in the military, even though they've been serving always. First of all, I mean, they've always been there. They've been serving openly for 4 years now. Yeah. And if you follow that court case, I enjoy following it because to me, it's the same as the DEI issue, right? Well, these people are not fit to serve because, it impacts unit cohesion. Yeah. Right. Sure. And, okay, where's your evidence of that? Yeah. We don't have any. We don't even know who all the transgender people are. We just know they're not fit to serve. Right. 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 And the judges, I was reading the rulings yesterday, the judges routinely say, the judiciary usually defers to the Pentagon on issues of military readiness. But this is so blatantly discriminatory and possibly unconstitutional that we don't feel we can. Yeah. Right. And if you get down into the weeds of DEI, you're going to see the same thing. Right. You're going to see the same thing. There's no proof. Right. General Brown was a great chief of staff of the Air Force, I thought. If you look at who got fired right after President Trump took over, I think it was 5 generals and one of them was a white guy. And I guarantee you that's the majority of general officers are white men. Yes. Right. Women are only 20% of the Air Force. So I'm not worried about the fact that the majority of them are white men. They're the majority of the force as well. Right. That makes sense. Yeah. But the ones that all got fired were not. Well, and we have some highly unqualified white men in cabinet positions now, highly unqualified, would never even make it on paper, let alone, I don't know how they got through the interview and then it's pure politics. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, that's never right. And yet it continues to happen over and over. And then, my husband trained me early on don't look over here, look over there, because this is where the stuff is happening. But if we point you there, you'll get really pissed off and busy over here, and then you won't see what we're really doing. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what's going on. Okay, what do we have here? We have transgender issues about distraction to the stripping of our societal norms, such as women's health, fair and safe elections, and aligning with Russia.
Yes. Kendall, you are on a roll.
Yep.
Thank you for commenting. Yeah, and it is transgender. It's not Day of Remembrance. It's recognizing Transgender Day.
Oh, is it?
And as a person who has a lot of transgender people in her network, I want to do that. I want to recognize them. At least one that I'm thinking of right now, and she knows who she is former military. And there's just, I think I've said the bullshit word how many times now in this? There's that. Now let me look at my notes and see. I do want you to tell us about, I'm going to look down at my notes, but tell us about what you speak on and who might want to hire you to come in and talk to their audiences. Because I know you do a number of different things. So
I do. I have three keynotes that I use, and I adapt them to the audience I'm speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is really follow your dreams, right? And that kind of tells the story of when I was 4 years old and first flew on an airplane, and my mom, and this is in the late 60s, when I said I wanted to be a stewardess, right? Because that's what the women did on airplanes in the late 60s.
Right.
She looked at me and said, well, you might think about being a pilot, honey. And
yay,
that
mom.
was it, right? Yeah, yay, mom, right? Because you didn't see it, right, at that point. So following your dreams and all the things that looked like they were going wrong in my life as it went forward, they ended up being a blessing in disguise, right? And how if you just keep, in my case, if you just keep working at it and you keep working at it, eventually you can get what you want.
Right.
I also talk about fighter pilots. We learn, jets are expensive, jet fuel is expensive, so we go fly for an hour, and then we come back and we watch the video and talk about it for about 2 hours, right? Mm-hmm. That's our debrief. That's where we get our lessons.
Yeah.
And it's a method that I use in my life as well that I recommend for others. So I talk about how to debrief your life and learn good lessons from the pivotal points you've had.
I like it.
And then the last one is called Inclusion, Everyone All the Time.
Yeah.
And that talks specifically about the different roles that people play in promoting an inclusive environment. Because I really think, and this is similar to your whole aligned at work philosophy, if you have an inclusive environment at work, you're going to naturally develop diversity and you're going to retain diverse talent, right? So it talks about, leaders' role. A lot of times we like leaders, we want them to praise in public and correct in private, right?
Right.
I'm not a believer in that anymore. You don't have to belittle people, but if someone says something that's against the culture that you want to promote at work in a meeting and you don't call them on it, then you're saying that behavior is acceptable.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to call out those things gently, kindly, at least the first time or two, right? And that helps people on your team see that you really mean what you're saying, right?
It does.
Everybody's vision and mission statement looks wonderful and encompassing and, welcoming, but how does the culture really treat people?
Yeah.
And then
you know what?
Yeah.
I just saw a short clip on LinkedIn, and it was a speaker I saw about what was in the before times. So it must be at least 5 years ago because it was before COVID. It's probably the year before. Peter, and I cannot think of his last name. I can see his face. Anyway, somebody put up, and it was a clip of him, and he was saying that your culture at work is not your vision, mission, your values. That all ties into it, but it's really the worst behavior you tolerate. So whatever you're letting slide by, that's what people look at. And I thought that is so true, because we go in and work with people on their culture and on their leadership because they're so tightly together. And yet you might be working for one person who's marvelous, and I might be working for one person who's, shall we say, not so marvelous. And my experience is going to be totally different than yours. So it really is, does the company let that person continue to get away with whatever it is that they're doing that doesn't sync up with what they say their values are, or what they say their purpose is, or all those things?
Exactly.
Which is exactly what you're talking about.
So we talked to that. I talked to it from the leadership role. I talked to it from the coworker role and being advocates, right? Because as the diverse member in most of my life, if I'm always speaking up for myself, yes, people are going to stop listening to me. That's true. Right? You sound like you're complaining all the time. Yes. And that does nobody any good. Or you're angry all the time. Yes. Or I'm angry all the time, right? So it really helps when somebody that's a member of the non-diverse group, in my case, white men, would go, yeah, let's not do that. That's not how we want to act right now. Or let's not talk about that. I don't want to hear any more about your date. You know? Those kind of things, then you are building the culture you want, right?
You really are.
And the culture needs to be built by everyone, not just the diverse members or the leaders.
Yes. And I would say, and one of the things I learned as I was coming up with, working with other women is that, and I would say anybody that's, anybody that can give a hand is you elevate each other's voices. So if I say something, but somebody talks right over me, then you might step in and say, hold on there. What did Laurie just say?
Exactly.
Or like Laurie just said, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of times that is, it builds on itself and it gets more notice when there's numbers of people in the room.
Yeah. And then I definitely we mentioned it earlier, the role of the diverse member, right? You're representing whether you want to or not, just accept that and go with it.
Yeah.
But also one of the biggest lessons I learned is choosing your battles.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Otherwise you end up with this hair.
What hill do you want to die on, as the Army guys would say, right? Where do I want to put my energies?
Yeah.
Is the person I'm going to talk to, are they receptive? Because sometimes when you just beat your head against a brick wall, right? You're never going to get through to that guy.
Pretty much.
Or and what's the right place to do that and the right time to do that? So it helps me and my sanity as well.
Yeah.
Right? You can't fight all the battles. You'll wear yourself down.
You can't.
But it also, you invest and you get those allies, right? You get those advocates.
Yep.
You get other people enjoying the culture that is representative.
Yeah.
And welcoming, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the inclusion piece. I've given it a few times, and I gave it to the Border Security and Border Patrol, ICE guys, and they needed some continuation training, and this was it, right? And they were not happy about being there. They did not want to be there. And I had two of them come up to me afterwards and say, I didn't want to come to this today because I do talk about unconscious bias as well. But I'm really glad I did. I really appreciated your message. And that was very, heartwarming, if you will, for me, because that's when you've reached someone, right?
It feels even more important.
Yeah. Someone who walked in thinking they were going to get the standard inclusion, it's all white men are bad kind of speech, and that's not what they got.
Yeah.
They got real things to talk about, real things to think about, and real ways that all of us can make it better.
Yeah. And for anybody that's listening to this, I don't think either Sharon or I hate white men.
No.
It's just that right now the systems are stacking again in favor of only one group. And until we broaden that out to all groups, all people, we don't get the best result out there. If we take that back to meritocracy, we don't have the best people in a candidate pool. We don't have as rich and vibrant of a world if it's all one flavor. And as a girl who loves vanilla, every once in a while, you got to put a little chocolate on it, or somebody just gave me the tip to sprinkle some cinnamon on it. I'm going to try that next time. Maybe a little caramel. I don't know. But we can't always be just one race, one gender, when there's a plethora of people out there. So Sharon, is there anything I didn't ask you or that we didn't talk about that you were hoping we would?
No, I think we covered most of what is concerning me about the process. Right?
Yeah. Okay, great. How would people get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you to hire you for speaking or to talk or just to connect?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Obviously, I also have a website. It's very creatively named SharonPreszler.com. And it talks about my keynotes as well as my coaching, because I do transition coaching as a life coach.
Nice.
You can reach me there, and that's the best way.
Okay. So either on LinkedIn or through the website, and then hopefully you will get lots of hiring done. Fawn, are there any more comments that we need to respond to? I'm thinking, no. Okay, thank you. No. So Sharon, I want to thank you for an open, honest conversation today. Thanks for helping me to say bullshit numerous times during the during the live. For those of you watching on the two channels that we are on, thank you. And we'll get this back out to LinkedIn and put it out there and spread it around and describe our technical issues. We're certainly not the only ones to have technical issues. Yeah. And with that, Thank you, everybody, for watching. And thanks so much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.